In the movie The Sound of Music, Julie Andrews tries to teach a group of children how to sing by saying, when you read, you begin with A, B, C. When you sing, you begin with Do, Re, Mi. As she continues up the musical scale with Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, she realizes she is losing her students, and she looks to the sky for inspiration before she launches into the familiar refrain, Do, a deer, a female deer. When I watched the scene recently, it awoke a familiar feeling in me, one I think many of us often feel. How do you improve your teaching style when you know your audience doesn't quite understand you? There are many different ways to teach the same topic, and some of those ways are more effective than others. The field of learning theory has been evolving since ancient Greece, when Plato theorized that learning was a process of remembering information already stored in your soul from birth. Obviously, some learning theories have faded over time, but others continue to inform how we teach to this day, and they're not mutually exclusive. These theories are ideas formed from centuries of observing people making connections and their relative effectiveness in different situations. To give you an idea of how the information you throw out into the world might land in someone's brain, I'm going to share a few of the more popular learning theories here. The early 20th century was dominated by a learning theory called behaviorism. The idea was that learning is a direct result of rewards, like good grades, and punishments, like detention. While this works for simple memorization tasks, it's not usually associated with higher order critical thinking. So for audiences of visualization, it's largely ignored. Several decades later, cognitivism became a popular psychological model for how people process information. Learning theorists interpreted the cognitivism model to mean that learning is a result of organized, sequenced, and understandable presentation of facts. This philosophy suggests that a sequence of visualizations that are sorted by size or chronologically might resonate well with people. One of the learning theories that has become popular more recently is called constructivism. Constructivism claims that learning is a result of building knowledge through interaction with the physical world. Constructivism can be applied to visual information through what experts call metavisual capability. That is, our ability to build a mental image from previous mental models. You can see this theory at work in the modern school system teaching scientific concepts like DNA. As young students, we start with an extreme abstraction of DNA that gives us a very limited, manageable amount of information. There are 4 DNA base pairs that are the building blocks of all life. We have no idea what shapes they are or that these shapes are called molecules. The base pairs start in our mental model of DNA as 4 of the letters that we've known since we first saw a spelling toy or a book. The base pairs are 4 different objects in the same category, and that's about it. Through activities that allow us to manipulate those 4 letters, we are eventually introduced to the full molecules guanine, cytosine, thymine, and adenine. We draw them in neat, straight-lined molecular diagrams. Our metavisual model of DNA grows from letters to line drawings. Again, through interaction with imagery in books or on computers, we progress to connecting our base pairs into a ladder and start to get some idea of the context in which the base pairs reside. We learn that each of these base pairs actually relies on a phosphate backbone to hold the structure together. Most students eventually construct the double helix model of DNA in their mind's eye. They begin to understand the organic complexity of DNA in the real world, witnessing how base pairs twist around each other. As this visual description of DNA becomes more complex, letters are replaced by colors and more physically accurate shapes. Most people don't get the opportunity to further build their metavisual model of DNA in the classroom, but visualization can give them a chance to interact with new visual information. Here, we can see an orange DNA double helix wrapped around a protein in its natural environment. This image encourages audiences to reference multiple mental models, and not only our pre-existing images of the DNA double helix. As visualizations look more three-dimensional and tangible, it's easier to equate them to real-world experiences, something like wearing a bracelet around your wrist. And in this animated visualization, we actually see DNA in motion, wrapping itself around those proteins, which brings the imagery even closer to our real-world experience. When we start talking about visualization in motion, there's another mental model we can easily relate to: the films of Hollywood. Even children with no formal schooling are familiar with movies and their visual language. Movies' use of framing, movement, and color are ingrained into most modern cultures. And at the end, this visualization helps us make a connection to another familiar image, the butterfly shape of a chromosome. The more these mental models interact, the more we learn. The most modern learning theories suggest that learning is a result of satisfying social and emotional needs and curiosities. For learners of various backgrounds, the DNA animation inspires curiosity through its beauty, whether or not we immediately understand all of the information encoded into it. These theories hold that learners should be encouraged to explore subjects that interest them and to do so with others. Visualization has a role in this by inspiring discussion through highly produced entertainment experiences that are inherently social. Visualization can also take advantage of social media and the massive network of people on the internet, helping build communities around common curiosities and encouraging group discovery. You may have heard the idea that some people are visual learners. This is largely an oversimplification. While certain topics might be easier to learn in one style or another, there's no empirical evidence that one person learns better with visual information than another. However, scientific visualization is strictly a visual format, and it can help for people to have access to information in various formats. Packaging visualizations with annotations and narrations provides verbal information, and distributing them in immersive theaters and games provides physical interaction. Preparing a multifaceted experience can help reinforce the value of a visualization. As we talk about using entertainment technology to educate people, it might be easy to think, well, this is great. I can lure people in with the promise of fun and then, boom, surprise them with some knowledge. Fortunately for those of us that don't like having our thoughts hijacked, this doesn't actually tend to work out most of the time. If people feel like they're being deceived or tricked, their mental defenses go up. Video game researchers found that if they disguised an educational activity as a game, people were more likely to quit the experience early than if it was presented as an educational experience in the first place. Generally, in the field of edutainment, we want to avoid chocolate-covered broccoli. That is, disguising something educational as pure entertainment. Audiences enjoy and seek out educational experiences, but they need to know what is fact and what is fiction. Separating fact and fiction isn't always straightforward. Years ago, we worked on a documentary about an interstellar alien visiting real scientific datasets across the cosmos. In exit interviews with audience members, some of them revealed that they thought that the science was too surprising to be true, and since the main character was imagined, they thought the science might be imagined also. It wasn't clear enough to them what was fact and what was fiction. Ultimately, educational experiences should aim to develop a person's agency. Agency is someone's ability to form questions about a subject and find their own answers to those questions. Teaching science through movies and video games is part of the process of building agency. It works differently than formal schooling in a classroom, and so we refer to it as informal science education. The primary goal of informal science education is not for students to memorize facts and figures. It's to build someone's interest in a subject and help send them out on their own journey of discovery. Research actually shows that students learn more in their formal education if they are first primed with an informal educational experience. Of course, just because the audience isn't memorizing facts, that doesn't mean that they aren't inspired or influenced by the facts. It's extremely important to present factually accurate information in a science education experience. Verifying that a visualization is factually accurate can be a challenge, but it is well worth the effort. It establishes you as a reliable source of information, and it attracts a broader audience. Communicating with the scientist who created the data is always your first line of defense, and they are usually happy to help. Nothing bothers a scientist more than sharing inaccurate information with the public. If you are a scientist working with your own data, it still helps to find another scientist in the field. A scientist should review your imagery at many stages in the design process. They will be able to latch on to idiosyncrasies of the data or incorrect assumptions you've made in your visual interpretation. You should be prepared to iterate on your design until it's as accurate as possible. It's also a good idea to have a scientist review your narration for factual errors. And always be sure to show gratitude to the scientists by giving them credit where appropriate. Likewise, run your decisions and methods by someone who understands your visualization process. They may be able to point out flaws in your algorithms, ask important questions about your approach, and suggest ideas you might not have considered.
So what should happen is that at least the big round simulated clues halo should line up pretty well with the actual Virgo cluster.
Oh, fantastic.
And then we place the eyes where the location of the searcher's homeworld, just beyond the edge of Virgo. I guess we're coming up to that location.
And then we're lined up after the interacting galaxies to head to the Milky Way.
Yep, there's our home off in the distance. And when the camera path is rising, it should feel pretty cool in the big dome, rising up to arrive at the colliding galaxies here.
And before you finalize your visualization, you should also share it with many non-experts. Part of your process can include asking questions about what they learned and doing side-by-side tests with non-experts to see how they react to two versions of the same visualization. The more people you interview about your imagery, the more you will refine your instinct for how people perceive what you are creating and for how they can use the information you've given them. It's a good idea to collect data on these interactions so you can identify trends and adjust your strategy in the future. Knowing how to be a good teacher is a lifelong journey without a lot of easy answers. Often we make the most progress as teachers through our experience. But by understanding the field of education, we can target our strategies and strengthen the impact of our visualizations on audiences who are fascinated by the physical world. Fun fact: while using fictional elements in a documentary is risky, many critics argue the opposite is true as well. Featuring science in a narrative film can lead to major misconceptions if it's not presented accurately. There are some incredible examples of narrative films with strong science credentials, though. The movie Interstellar was written by a famous astrophysicist named Kip Thorne, who stayed on as the science advisor for the whole film. And Terrence Malick's film Tree of Life had so much accurate science imagery that much of the footage was actually re-released as a scientific IMAX documentary.